Capcom. I would be surprised if you didn't know who Capcom were. From Megaman to Resident Evil to Street Fighter, this Japanese game publisher has really held itself steady through time. Yeah, sure, maybe with a few duds and awful decisions here and there, but still, the royalty of fighting and survival horror games have generally held strong throughout the years. But am I still salty about Breath of Fire 6 and Mega Man Legends 3? Absolutely.
So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be looking across time and space itself to talk about a bunch of forgotten Capcom games. Now, I think that through the 80s to the early 2000s, Capcom really was one of the best and most prolific game makers out there. They released so many classics that there's bound to be a bunch that have fallen through the cracks. And speaking of game makers, before we get started with Capcom, we need to talk about today's sponsor, Game Maker. Are you interested in making a video game? Well, Game Maker Studio is the fastest and most user-friendly cross-platform game development tool out there. Not only is it a good tool for learning how to make your first game, but also a bunch of well-known games and developers use it. And I know you've played some of them too. Huge indie hits like Nuclear Throne, Hyperlight Drifter, Spelunky, Hotline Miami, and a little-known game called Undertale for one. If you've ever thought the process of creating games was too difficult or complicated, well then Game Maker Studio is your solution. They have lots of success stories with developers starting from scratch without any resources and pulling it off. Game Maker is an all-in-one studio, meaning you can go from concept to finished game all in this one program. Game Maker Studio 2 has no barriers to entry, it has a very powerful set of functionality tools, and is fantastic for 2D game development. It's got this drag and drop system where you can integrate features and action scripts without ever having to write code. It's got a great interface that allows you to easily navigate through all your resources. It's a good tool for me, someone who spends like 10 minutes every morning just trying to find my phone. Seriously, this thing just disappears. It's probably my cats. Game Maker also provides a ton of video and written tutorials as well, so there's plenty out there for those wanting to take the extra step and learn more complicated features. The official Discord and Reddit forums also have a ton of other aspiring game developers, so you'll be able to share and talk with other people just like you. Making a video game has never been more centralized and easy. Game Maker's pretty rad, and they do have a proven success record with a ton of fantastic video games, and they're waiting for you to check them out today. Go click the link down in the description to start your free trial, download Game Maker Studio, and start making something dope today. Thanks to Game Maker Studio for the sponsor, but for now, we're going to Slumberland to talk about Little Nemo, the Dream Master.
In the early days, Capcom made themselves famous not just off of original IPs, but their ridiculous slew of licensed titles. Sure, people fondly remember Ghosts and Goblins, 1942, and the absolutely cursed early box arts of Mega Man. Yo, for real, bring fat washed up Mega Man back. He was my boy. But then you have the entire Disney Capcom collection of games that are generally held in high regard. Darkwing Duck, Mickey Mousecapades, The Little Mermaid, and you got weirder stuff like Willow, The Punisher, or the Domino's Pizza mascot, sure. The unfortunate thing about making licensed games though is that 9 out of 10 times you'll never see them ported again. Due to whatever licensing agreements a lot of these companies may have, a lot with groups that may or may not be under at this point, something may just be completely lost to time forever. I think we were lucky to see a lot of the licensed Disney stuff come back into the light after so long, but that's definitely not the case for Little Nemo, the Dream Master. Originally an American comic from early 1900, it was adapted into a movie and a video game 90 some odd years later. A movie that was considered a massive financial bomb that was stuck in development hell for nearly a decade. One that had huge names like George Lucas, Ray Bradbury, and Hayao Miyazaki step away from. But also a movie that had decent cult success on VHS when it hit the States in 1992, becoming something that you probably had 1 or 2 kids on the playground talking about. And that was not me. I was the kid who wouldn't shut up about An American Tail. The game? It's pretty dope. Weirdly, this came out a year after the Japanese theater release and 2 years before it would hit the States, so Little Nemo, the Dream Master, existed as this weird thing. A story about a kid named Nemo stuck in a dream world, feeding animals candy and then doing whatever the heck this is. Sure, Little Nemo kind of falls somewhere between A Boy and His Blob and Kirby with the pace of something like Goonies 2. Yes, the video game sequel to Goonies. So Capcom really couldn't do much wrong back then, and well, they didn't here either. Little Nemo is a pretty solid NES game, although very, very, very difficult. There's a total of 8 transformations you can do in this game, each with a different ability and HP pool. You've got to collect a certain amount of keys in order to reach the exit, so each level is just exploring till you find the shiny thing. You're just gonna die though, because enemies do this thing where they never stop spawning and you're a little squishy baby. Nemo's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure, but it's a solid platformer for those who like something challenging. It's just unfortunately another one of those licensed games that time's totally gonna forget about due to its inability to be ported anywhere. Now Capcom did make an arcade version of Nemo as well, but that's more of a quarter munching platformer. It's weird enough that this huge financial disaster got a video game, let alone 2, but here we are. Nowadays you can find the Little Nemo film for free on YouTube via the original company. It is a cute family film with a history that goes way deeper than I'm gonna get into. But hey, here's hoping that one day a bunch of these license holders can get together and have a roundtable discussion on whether or not they should properly preserve video games. Please do that.
It's mostly because I'm selfish and I'm tired of them removing MVC2. Speaking of licensed games, I hope you're ready for a ton more, because I just realized that most of them are. Let's go.
Did you know UN Squadron was a licensed game? In Japan, it's known as Area 88, based off the anime and manga of the same name. What about the proto-survival horror JRPG Sweet Home? Based off of a much better horror film. This kind of thing happened all the time, and as good as of a game some of these were, they're just kind of stuck on whatever console they released on. But only UN Squadron has a gamer difficulty. Never forget that. It's a good ass game, by the way. But of all the weird licensed games from the 2D era that come to mind, there's none weirder to me than the arcade classic Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Unless you're one of like 10 specific people, the words Cadillacs and Dinosaurs probably don't ring a bell. In the early 90s, Capcom were truly the premier arcade beat-em-up developer. You can make multiple videos just talking about these with games like Final Fight, Alien vs. Predator, Dungeons and Dragons, and more. Heck, they released a collection in the last few years with a bunch of the non-licensed games from those days. But in 1993, Capcom decided it was time to make a beat-em-up for the moderately popular comic called Xenozoic Tales. A story of a post-apocalyptic world where humans built underground cities to escape pollution and natural disasters, only to find out we're back the dinosaurs. It's like the opposite of the end of the TV show. This got turned into Cadillacs and Dinosaurs for some brand recognition, I guess. A new kids TV show and a video game. The TV series was not a huge success, despite the premise being Fallout with freaking dinosaurs, but alas, who am I to judge the taste of kids in the early 90s? We were too busy watching Sonic. Can you blame us?
If so, your brains are scrambled.
The game, however, stands on its own without any need for anything else. It's a 3-player beat 'em up. It's super high quality. The gameplay is fun and exciting. The premise is absolutely ridiculous and hilarious. The second I was running around, punching and shooting dudes and raptors in the face, I was sold. And if you aren't, you're no fun. This is an arcade game, so by nature it's a quarter muncher, but a real fun one. But most importantly, it's got one of the best soundtracks Capcom's ever put out. Like, actually, it was done in a joint attempt by Isao Abe and Seun Nishigaki, and I mean, their catalog speaks for itself. There's a crazy number of Capcom beat-em-ups that are going to be forgotten with time, but something about Cadillacs and Dinosaurs really stood out to me. If you ever get a chance to play this on an official cabinet or by any method possible, please do. Oh, and don't worry, in case you were wondering, yes, there is a Cadillac.
Alright, let's jump forward a bit. When the 5th generation of video games hit, Capcom began firing on all cylinders with their extremely high quality 2D games and an onslaught of Resident Evil titles. Now, Capcom and Resident Evil were some of the first games to really go after a adult market, and not in a like, haha, boobs kind of way. But also, Capcom released over 60 games on the PlayStation 1 alone, and that is a lot, and a lot more are coming. But right now, I want to talk about my main squeeze, the Dreamcast. Capcom loved the Dreamcast.
For a lot of people, myself included, Capcom is synonymous with fighting games, and if you followed them in the 90s, how could it not be? Every time I think I've played every Capcom fighter, another game slides out from underneath the kitchen sink and is like, yo, what up? It's your boy. But between the Saturn and Dreamcast, Sega was about as good as you could get for arcade-perfect emulation of their 2D and early 3D fighters. Plus, you also got yourself Power Stone 1 and 2, and who doesn't like that? Probably people who were mad that the Nintendo 64 only had 3 Capcom games. Don't worry, I'm not still mad about the Dreamcast. Nope, not at all. If you were to look specifically at fighting games on the Dreamcast, there's so much quality. Even just narrowing it down to Capcom, there's so many games to pick from. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is top tier. Project Justice is a gem, even if it is neutered from the original Japanese release, and Street Fighter Third Strike is still my favorite fighting game. I've yet to play anything I like more than that, and that's a good problem to have. But the one I really like that I think gets glossed over quite a bit is a little gem called Tech Romancer. This game is awesome. So right out of the gate, Tech Romancer isn't as fluid or accessible as Third Strike. It's a bit older, it's got that late 90s, early 3D jank on it, but it also has a ton of massive robots fighting each other, all of which are inspired by series or genre of mech anime in Japan. See, this is Armor Knight Grand Kaiser, not Mazin Kaiser. And don't forget about Super Defense Armor Dixon, the not Gundam. It's got this fun, hyper anime vibe going on, accompanied by the art of Shoji Kawamori, the dude famous for designing a ridiculous amount of mechs through anime history. And one of my favorites, the XGP from Outlaw Star. This thing is so sick. As far as a fighting game goes, I think it holds itself together. The Dreamcast version of this game has a story mode with multiple branches you can follow, some of which are really dark. Like, hey, let's say you want to rebel against the system. You tell this dude, I'm a human, I want to fight for my freedom. Then it turns out the rest of your arcade mode was a fever dream induced in a state after you were shot and killed. Nice. That's the anime mecha I love. Depressing. Not even kidding right now. Tech Romancer is a really solid Capcom fighter that's actually a spiritual successor to another fighter that didn't quite make it here on the consoles called Cyberbots Full Metal Madness. And you might recognize this guy right here from Marvel vs. Capcom. It's just hard to beat giant robots. Sorry, every other video game ever.
So yeah, Tech Romancer is pretty dope, but this isn't the only Dreamcast game we're talking about today. Next up is a game that by all means shouldn't have been published by Capcom, but was also actually developed by them. Spawn in the Demon's Hand.
Yeah, Capcom made a licensed Spawn game on the Dreamcast, and this thing is rare. Generally, if you look at the most pricey games on the system, they're all Capcom titles and like Skies of Arcadia, but high up there is Spawn in the Demon's Hand, and sorry, but I'm not spending nearly $100 for something with reviews like this. Spawn in the Demon's Hand is an arcade fighting game, but one closer to Power Stone than Street Fighter, and also one with camera controls. This video's been filled with good games so far, but, well, it's time for that to come to an end. Spawn for the Dreamcast is a game that could have been really cool, but the insanely difficult AI, the extremely bland and repetitive gameplay, and lack of any interesting modes or story really holds it down. Seriously, a game based off of a narrative-intensive comic like Spawn is completely lacking any notable story or anything that would, like, introduce people to the concept. But you do get this. This is the most year 2000 thing I think I've ever seen. I can't keep up. It's like the music video for Creed's Bullets, except with a Saturday morning cartoon vibe. Ah yes, famous kids cartoon Spawn. Apparently, the band who performed this song is called Crankshaft. 10 out of 10, guys. The game itself is rough. It's meant to be played as a multiplayer game where you just beat the crap out of each other, and it has a single player boss mode, but it's, how do I put this? It's got no impact. You can die and be killed in like 2 seconds without knowing what's going on. The camera's flying all over the place, and the general feel doesn't have any weight to it. There's a stupid amount of unlockable characters, but no one's gonna do that. Generally at this time, Capcom was pretty great, but not today, y'all. However, I did win a match like this one time, and that was pretty cool. Somehow, this is judged as one of the best Spawn video games, which is really sad, actually. So let's just say Soul Calibur 2 is the best and move on. Yay, Soul Calibur 2, yay!
Sometime in the next generation, with the GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox, Capcom went full steam ahead, and they were really keeping up. Video games were becoming more and more complex, and you always hear the age-old tale of old developers struggling to keep up with the transition to 3D, but Capcom had no problem. They made a lot of PlayStation 2 games, and I'm gonna be talking about 4 of them, and no, one of them is not Breath of Fire Dragon Quarter, as much as I hate that. I hate it. They got really experimental with this gen, and the first game that comes to mind is Under the Skin. This game is weird.
I am very surprised that Under the Skin got localized for a Western audience, especially when you realize we didn't get the PlayStation 2 Darkstalkers collection, Monster Hunter 2, or Namco Cross Capcom. Under the Skin came out in the States around the same time that Katamari Damacy did, but obviously only one of those had a lasting impact, which is weird considering only one of them stars multiple Resident Evil characters. Clearly, Western audiences can only take one completely absurd game at a time. USA, USA. In Under the Skin, you take control of an alien named Cosme who abducts humans with a laser gun in order to form a disguise of that human and cause havoc. Alright, except instead of playing like Destroy All Humans, you are instead competing against another alien in order to competitively mug humans. Yeah, sure, this makes sense. Also, one of the levels has you attacking Nemesis, as Jill or Chris or whatever, I don't know. I think that Under the Skin has everything going for it except good gameplay. The aesthetic is wonderfully weird. The soundtrack has a fun, bouncy quality to it that rivals Jet Set Radio and Katamari at times. The concept is simple to understand and it makes you want to give it a shot. Like, oh, I can play as an alien and prank people. Let's go. Give me your money. But the game just feels extremely limited and kind of janky. Heck, you can beat the entire thing with nothing left to do in like 2 or 3 hours, and unfortunately, this is lacking the replayability of something more, well, Capcom-y. It definitely has charm and is one of those things you want to try out because, well, duh. But unfortunately, this one will probably be forgotten due to its lack of substance.
So aesthetically speaking, what is the exact opposite of Under the Skin? Go ahead, make a guess, I'll wait. If you answered Chaos Legion, then that is correct. I don't have a prize or anything, but good job. You did it.
Chaos Legion is the embodiment of Hot Topic in the mid-2000s. It's something that reeks of Tetsuya Nomura despite having literally no involvement. Chaos Legion is also a game I really wanted to play as a kid. Come on, let's not pretend like this wasn't the coolest looking game at Hollywood Video back in the day, but it was also checked out by the kid wearing some of these. I mean, hey, I guess they'd be easy to catch with all these strings. But now, as a jaded old man who had to Google what a Susibaka was, I can firmly state that Chaos Legion is a video game. Oh, please, you're too kind. Guess what? This is a licensed video game. Chaos Legion is written by To Ubukata, the guy who wrote Marduk Scramble and seasons 2 and 3 of Psycho Pass. Surprise, surprise, Capcom did themselves another licensed game, but I think they took it too literally this time, considering they made the game look like the novel. That is to say, white and gray as far as the eyes can see, Superman 64 fog and words everywhere, like everywhere. This is more text than the logo of the bouncer.
The Bouncer.
You play as Sieg Warheit in a world overrun by 4 billion demons who cover the screen at all times. The main antagonist is this like more edgy French Sephiroth looking dude named Victor Delacroix. And I mean like, yeah, it's basically Sephiroth. Every cutscene in this game looks like it's part of a Hawthorne Heights AMV. You've got the ability to summon monsters or legion of your own using your soul gauge. They're sword dudes, arrow dudes, bomb dudes, and shield tentacle things. You can tell that Capcom was wanting to make an interesting combat system following the concept of stands from something like JoJo, but it feels more akin to like Devil May Cry Light or Drakengard plus Dynasty Warriors.
I don't believe in magic.
The end result is a very boring standard combo with little to change it up. Oh, and also ridiculously punishing gameplay with an inability to switch the difficulty once you've started. So not only does Chaos Legion look nearly the same for a majority of the experience, but it'll also kick your ass and force you to reset missions in order to grind half XP until you can finally beat a mission. Despite trying to do something cool with the Death Note Hot Topic Garugamesh vibes,
No!
Chaos Legion feels extremely bland and doesn't quite achieve the gothic opera feeling it set out to be. Even the cutscenes feel like they're moving at 2 miles an hour, which unfortunately to me means the whole thing is bound to become forgotten. I think there's a blueprint for something cool here, but the gameplay just isn't there. At least the music's cool, but Capcom doesn't do bad soundtracks, so it doesn't count.
Speaking of good soundtracks, there's one game franchise that Capcom has been notoriously good at pumping out bangers left and right for, and it's Megaman. And of course, we're gonna be talking about rock today because it's Capcom. But the question is, which game?
Honestly, there's a lot. I actually covered a decent amount of these in my weird Mega Man spin-offs video if you want to see a bunch, but today we're talking about one of the PlayStation 2 games. Not Rockman Power Battle Fighters, not Mega Man X7, as much as I'd like to forget that one, but Mega Man X Command Mission. Mega's no stranger to taking a weird adventure here and there, be it a 3D shooter, a fighter, a kart racing game, or in this case, a Japanese RPG. That's right, the franchise that has been known for multiple decades at this point was going to try its hand at turn-based combat, random battles, and grinding. So here's what happened. We're in a post-X7 world, Axel's here, on the box anyway. Command Mission is one of those games that even though it bears the X spin-off title, it's actually its own spin-off that takes place in an entirely separate timeline and world. So like a spin-off.
What am I fighting for?
But worst of all, Mega Man has lips. Big, gross, Sonic Adventure-ass lips that flap around like an undercooked French fry. Although it is the voice of Mr. Domon Kashu.
His hand to mine glows with an awesome power! I am a maverick hunter.
Oh, G Gundam. Though I prefer this clip.
It's a good thing I planned for this by continuing to work on my body.
Mega Man Command Mission is about as generic of a JRPG as it gets. Capcom does have experience with the genre, considering Breath of Fire's 1 through 4, and I would say they gave us a pretty cool combat system. It's like a hybrid of Final Fantasy X with an energy system for setting up combos. Each Maverick Hunter has different equipable mods you'll find laying around that you can use in tandem to do big damage. There's all kinds of hidden stuff you can find deep inside dungeons, and honestly, it does play pretty well. That is, until like the 100th random battle, then the 101st, so on. I've played JRPGs with frequent random battles and slow-paced combat, but Command Mission really takes it to another level that's kind of irritating. It's closer to the Inuyasha JRPG, where you're spending so much time waiting for battles to zone in, enemies to perform their attacks, and it just drains on you. The story itself is very lightly sprinkled in, and honestly, kinda uninteresting. There's like a tower, bad guys are doing the bad thing. Despite the fact that you begin the game with Zero, everyone's favorite dude brah, he splits out of the party real early on and leaves you for dust. It's a shame, because Command Mission as a concept is really weird, but simultaneously intriguing. They even made a decent world and concept and a fun battle system. They just really wanted you to waste your time and sit in random battles for what feels like forever. If they tripled the experience points and cut down on encounters by a third as well, I think this game could be a 7 or 8 out of 10, but unfortunately, we're stuck waiting. At least the voice acting's decent, if you're a main character.
I'm not a supporter of Epsilon, but shouldn't you, as a Reploid, support the idea of our independence?
It's time for the last game of the day. Now, normally I try to save a banger for last, but I'm not really sure if this is a banger by any means. It's a doozy, that's for sure. I've been wanting to cover this for a really long time, and I've been wondering when would be the time, and I figured, hey, why not right now? Let's talk about Crimson Tears.
All right, here we go. Crimson Tears should be a really cool game. It's a high concept action RPG in a unique futuristic setting, one with cybernetic enhancements and cyborgs, one with a heavy reliance on martial arts and combo branches. Sounds good, right? I mean, yeah, you start with a bunch of cool flips, explosions, generous booba bouncer, generous hair bouncer, and it's got promise. Oh, but wait, you just wait. This was just published by Capcom. Who developed it? Yep, Dream Factory. For those unacquainted, that's Tobal number 1, that's Air Guy's God Bless the Ring, and of course, my old nemesis, the Bouncer. Yep, twice in a video, let's go. I'm not sure what it is, but Dream Factory really wanted to make one specific type of video game. The, as I said, high concept action RPG. One that uses a fighting game style combo system, but with RPG level ups, gear, and weapons. The Bouncer was a more cinematic approach to this, taking the designs and quotatos of Tetsuya Nomura and tossing them into a high-stakes story involving the fate of the world and cyborgs. Hairgaze was a nonsensical fighter with a bunch of mini-games in a JRPG mode called Brand New Quest: The Forsaken Dungeon, a quest mode with a ton of dungeon crawling. Tobal number 1 had a thing, I think. The Bouncer was the last time that Dream Factory would work with Square Enix, as they had now moved on to a collaboration with Spike and, of course, Capcom. And well, this would be their last time collaborating with Capcom.
Did you manage to escape?
If I were to tell you that Crimson Tears is just a combination of every other game I've brought up, would you believe me? It has a weird futuristic setting like Bouncer without the dog street. It has extremely human passing androids like Bouncer. It has the exact same gameplay structure as Air Guys, God Bless the Ring. It even has extremely similar combo systems of that and Tabal. This was Dream Factory doing the thing that they knew how to do and rolling with it. Except instead of Cloud Strife, you can play dress up as Guile or Morgan from Darkstalkers. God, I miss Darkstalkers. It is so unfortunate that Crimson Tears sucks. They had years after the Bouncer to make things work, but somehow this looks and feels worse in a lot of aspects. It definitely feels like a major budget title in comparison. The game is set up in a way to where you just trudge through random dungeons, grinding levels and collecting items to get deeper and deeper. It's a very gamey video game that might have worked a generation prior, but in 2004, a year where we were getting bigger, more cinematic experiences, Crimson Tears doesn't hit the mark. The story also comes off as nonsensical. You're like a group of 3 secret agents infiltrating something. The text crawl says it's a riot, but I can't really tell. People are just name dropping each other and being like, hey, we're humans, right? Right? Then after doing a bunch of sick flips away from explosions, Amber's like, oh my god, I can't believe I killed someone. Like, girl, you were clearly trained to do this. Come on.
It was my first time in a fight.
Oh, Dream Factory. No, they're doing the same thing that they did in 1996 and 1994, and surprisingly, it doesn't work. Who'da thought?
Every single level in this game is a flat plane, and money is designed specifically for you to donate to a mayor in order to make your shops grow. It doesn't happen naturally. The dungeons themselves go from plain and zombies to a ridiculous amount of enemies that'll knock you out in 2 hits and traps that'll ragdoll you across the floor. If you die, that character is stuck there and you have to send another character back through the dungeon in order to retrieve them. Exactly like the mode in Air Gaze. Somehow, Dream Factory tricked another publisher into letting them do their shtick again, and without a big name like Squaresoft or a demo disc with Final Fantasy VII, it certainly didn't sell or get good reviews. Yikes. So maybe I'm a bit biased towards this game due to their history, but they really made a dud here. A bloated dungeon crawler without a very interesting story filled with half-naked girls showing their butts. Something that feels like it was made in 1998 when games like these already exist. But the saddest part is that it, like every single one of their previous games, has so much potential to be something right up my alley, and it drops the ball. Unfortunately, it seems like Crimson Tears is pretty much destined to remain forgotten. I wish there was more to say, but when most of the environments all look the same and like 95% of playing the game is just grinding, there's not much I can. Although, whoever thought the item cap in this game should only be 24 is a crazy person. I spent like an entire hour just sorting my inventory. Hype.
Well, that's Crimson Tears and a bunch of forgotten Capcom games. Now, with a publisher like Capcom, there's probably an endless amount of games I could really talk about, but I wanted to talk about things that I've always had on my mind or things that really stuck out to me. I mean, shoot, I totally forgot that Dream Factory kept going after the Bouncer. Like, and there's more games somehow. I know I missed something, so if there's something you think I should cover in the future, drop it down in the comments below, but for now, I must depart. That's all for now. I've been Austin, and catch me next time when I talk about another Capcom game. I think we're a little overdue for some clones.
Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Blackfoot Ferret, Brandon Howe, Chris Shelton, Christopher Olivia, Darren Newton, DX Buster, David Molnar, GM Pinks, Irrational, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Jordy McCaffrey, Kevin Zanowski, Karen Arter, Legendary, Nick Irving, P-Funk, Randall Bentley, and Ryan Talbert. Thank you so much for your generous support. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I enjoyed playing all these Capcom games, and also I have a little announcement to make. I'm gonna be streaming the Final Fantasy New Game Plus, like I said last time. I haven't decided if I'm gonna do it on YouTube or Twitch yet, but catch me later this week for my first stream on that, and it should be a good time. New videos are gonna be coming out weekly, it looks like, for the rest of the month, so that's fun, that's exciting. Couple promises from last year and a couple new things I'm having fun with. But yeah, get some sleep, stay hydrated. I've had 3 hours of sleep. Goodbye.